And is this being adopted right now as a
Some, I mean,
methodological framework?
it requires a lot of trust going into it because you have to trust the team you're getting in bed with and signing a contract with. So often it's owners that do a lot of repeat projects and can use the same team over again. So big hospital groups will use IPD sometimes. I know Disney has used IPD on a couple projects. So owners that do a lot of repeat work and can use the same team again and again that they already have some trust with, they tend to be the ones that'll.
Who signs the contract with the owner? Is it the developer, the designer?
It
The
depends.
build?
Yeah, it depends. On a P3 project, it'll be the developer, and then because it's like a design build project, but there's a developer in the middle bringing some of the money to the table. But typically on a design build project, the design builder signs a contract with the owner. On a design bid build project, the architect has a contract with the owner, and the contractor has a contract with the owner separately. Same with CM at risk. So it varies based on the procurement method who is contractually tied to the owner.
Got it. Very interesting. Back to your ACEC presidency of the Florida
Sure.
State Chapter. So, how was your experience?
It was very good. I mentioned before that you kind of figure out who you are in going staying on the technical side of things or going the management side of things. I've been a part of other organizations too, like ASCE. I was president for the Florida Structural Engineers Association 8-9 years ago, and they're more technically focused. ACEC is really about the business of engineering. It's the American Council of Engineering Companies. So it's not just about any technical aspect of engineering, but about how we do engineering in private practice for many different owners, many different project types. And working with the team, the people that we had to work with there, it's an organization that's filled with leaders. So we had very bright, driven people that had a lot of leadership skills across the board that I was working with. So for me, it was a great experience, great opportunity. And I'd love to do it again when I've got some spare time, which is quickly fleeting these days.
What was your agenda when you stepped into that presidency? Did you have a predetermined agenda or goals that you wanted to achieve during your term?
Yeah, so a few years ago, and I'm not sure where you're located, but there was a condominium collapse in South Florida, the Champlain Towers collapse. President-elect, I think at the time, or vice president at the time of ACEC, but I was also the only structural engineer on the board at that level. So we quickly brought together a group of building professionals to figure out what we're going to do about it. It wasn't the question of why it failed. The question became, what's Florida going to do about it to make sure it doesn't happen again? And if the building professionals don't speak up and give recommendations, the lawyers were sure doing it, the insurance companies were still doing it, and the lawmakers are going to listen to the ones that are talking. So we realized the building professionals had to do something about that. So we brought together a group of not just engineers, but architects, building officials, people that work for the Concrete Repair Institute. So people that were all building professionals that all had a stake in what was happening to figure out what a consensus agreement, what a consensus solution would look like. And we did. We brought together a white paper. We put it to the legislature. We lobbied for it, and it became law that year because the legislature was under tremendous pressure to do something about it. That kind of collaboration is what I really wanted to foster in ACEC in my term as president. So building on what other states, I think one other state's done this, we pulled together a new engineering magazine called Engineering Florida. And the intent was, every trade association, every organization's got an agenda. For pretty much every engineering organization, it's public advocacy. Doctors and lawyers have TV shows and movies about them. CSI talks about crime scene investigators. There's not a lot of sex and glamour around engineering, and we don't get a lot of people. So people don't know what we do a lot of times. So every engineering organization talks about what engineers do, but they all do it in their own little ways. And there's no reason we can't come together and talk about that. So my primary agenda, and we got this done last year, was to bring together an engineering publication that could bring us all together to talk about what engineering is, what we do, not technically, but just in general, and what it means for the public. Because engineers are everywhere. We're talking on Teams right now because software engineers figured out how to make this kind of technology work. It's engineering is everything that we touch, and it's bringing public awareness to that. So we put together a magazine that we're putting out every quarter now. That's got 6 different engineering associations attached to it that are all collaborating to put this out and talk about engineering from different aspects, talk to the public, talk to the lawmakers, and talk out in general about what the benefits of engineering are to society. That was a long answer to your question.
It's a very interesting one for sure, because did you exit that presidency term feeling that you achieved something, you managed to pull things forward?
I very much do. Yeah, that was a pretty big accomplishment for me, for the association. I've had a lot of people tell me that they were quite impressed by that, as well as the Surfside, the white paper we put together in response to that, and the laws that got passed because of it. So I feel very rewarded by my experience in the leadership of that organization.
Surfside, that you brought it up. How did it happen? Why did it happen?
Well, there's the federal government and the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They're still working on that, and they're pulling in technical professionals from all over the country to look at all different aspects of it. They're gathering wreckage to look at material failures, looking at drawings, looking at inspection reports, and looking at every different possible scenario. Based on what the media had put out, and the New York Times had a really good piece that had some 3D animations about just showing some photos that they had gathered together. My take is it was my gut tells me it was a collapse of the pool deck, which could have been overloaded. It could have been under designed. It could have been under reinforced. The construction practices may not have, the rebar that was specified may not have been put in place. That's the kind of stuff that NIST, their investigation is going to uncover. But it looks like that the pool deck collapsed first, and once that happens, the floors of a building also brace the columns of a building. And if a column that was designed to be this tall is now all of a sudden this tall, that's going to buckle the column potentially, and then that could bring down the whole building if there's not redundancy built into it. So that was my take, but NIST is going to have a very detailed, thorough report about that, just like they did for the Trade Center when that happened 20 years ago. Our response was really, what's the state going to do about it to prevent it from happening again? Because that we can control. And buildings that are concrete buildings on the coast that are 60 years old, in Miami, in South Florida, they have an inspection program, but in the rest of the state, they don't, to have existing buildings looked at and maintained. And condos are an area, because you don't have one owner, you've got every condo owner in that building is an owner of the building. And then having a condo board agree to pay $10 million to upgrade their building every 10 years, it's often not popular. So getting laws put in place to require them to have inspections done, to require funding, reserves to be held, to fund maintenance and things like that, that's a common sense solution that Florida came up with.
Was there a mandate to go out and inspect every other concrete building? At least, I don't know if statewide or in South Florida, because obviously, how do you know that there's no other time bombs out there?
Well, and that's where condos again are the big wild card, because many savvy owners, hospitals, property, office building owners, power companies, they all know that building inspections and maintaining your buildings is something you have to account for. Condo owners are the ones they've not been required to do that so far. South Florida does have a program that requires all buildings after 40 years to be inspected. The Champlain Towers actually was undergoing its inspection at the time that it happened. And very quickly after that, there was a lot of quick reaction by building officials, by local building owners, that they brought inspectors in to look at the buildings to make sure there weren't any ticking time bombs. And there were a number of buildings in South Florida that were closed down and had condo owners evacuate shortly after Champlain because of that. The rest of the state is where there was a lot of shortfall, and there hadn't been a collapse in, say, St. Petersburg yet. But there are plenty of exposed concrete condos down there that should be looked at, and that's what's happening right now.
Is it expensive to bring inspectors in and inspect these condo buildings?
Relatively, no. I mean, it could be anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000, depending on how much of an inspection you're talking about. And often, especially for exposed concrete buildings, you can see signs of distress. A trained engineer, a trained inspector can see when there's signs that rebar is corroding, that concrete is spalling, that cracks are happening, that movement's happening. There's very often signs that a building is having some issues before a catastrophe happens, and that's what an inspection would do, is just have trained eyes come out and take a look at it. And if there are some issues that are visibly seen, then you can do a more detailed assessment and figure out exactly what's wrong and exactly how to fix it.
And when you have an inspection report come out, does it usually mandate certain changes or certain actions to happen, or is it continues to be optional?
Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, and that's one of the other things too, is there weren't really requirements statewide to do anything about it. But and any engineer that we're ethically bound that if we go out to a building and see that there's an imminent issue, there's an issue that maybe a column could potentially have a failure if it was overloaded, we're going to make, a good engineer or a good inspector is going to bring that very much to the forefront, make that an issue, make the owner very aware of it, because they understand that at that point they know there's a problem and they need to raise the red flag about it.
And how far can that red flag go?
Well, the building officials have. I don't know if the law previously said this.
That's the point that I'm trying to get to, is that how much can you enforce the changes to happen? I mean, you just brought a really good point earlier that a condo is not just one owner, a condo building. I mean, it's not just one owner. It's just 20, 30, 50, God knows how many owners are in there. And how do you enforce these changes to take place? Because there's a cost attributed to it.
The building officials have to get involved at that point. And that's where the building official would have the responsibility. The local authority have a jurisdiction. They would have the responsibility to say the building is unsafe and you need to evacuate it.
Do they? Meanwhile, when an inspector go into a building, he comes out feeling that building there's something wrong happening there. Is just not happy about it. There's a imminent danger for columns to collapse. I don't know, the structure itself to not be as it should. Does that get flagged somewhere? How do you know that in the meantime, between the report coming out and whatever action plan is being developed for that building to be, taken care of, like condo owners are not going to just go and sell these apartments or condos to new people that have no clue what's going on there and just flee?
Yeah, and that's where the insurance industry and the financial backers, the mortgage industry, they've been very nervous the last few years, and there's been a lot of back and forth and questions within the industry.
Do they get informed? Is there a rule or a law that forces inspectors or condo owners or whatever to inform these agencies or entities?
As best I understand, that's what they're working through right now, is they're making sure that there's a lot more airtight laws and there's rules around reporting and around making owners aware, making prospective buyers aware of potential issues with the building. Those are the things that I believe are being still working through the legislature every year. 2 years ago, the law passed requiring inspections. Last year, a lot of tweaks were made to help make it more realistic and make it more enforceable. I'm sure over the next coming years, as the industry continues to react, a lot of different industries are continuing to react. There will be additional modifications to make those, make the requirements more solid.
Are these local legislations or efforts or federal?
Right now, it's state of Florida. They're the ones that have the issues, but I know a lot of other states are looking to Florida and looking at what we do about it to see what they do about it. But this is really a local issue primarily.
Looks like there's a whole lot to still do on that front. I mean,
there is. It's never perfect, but I think it's a whole lot better than it was 3 years ago.
How's the Florida chapter relationship with the national ACEC?
It's pretty good. I think there's a lot of alignment where, especially in engineering tends to be licensed by state. Well, tend to be. It is licensed by state. So every state has their own issues to deal with. And ACEC, more than any other engineering organization, we are a lot more politically active than other organizations. So in addition to dealing with local codes and things like that, we're also focused on how we interface with the Department of Transportation, how we interface with lawmakers, and if there's issues with a law that somebody's proposing that's going to negatively impact engineers, we'll be politically active and make sure that our lobbyists are talking to the legislators to make sure they know our side of the issues. That happens at the state level, but it also happens nationally. So when there's issues like the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act and the CHIPS Act that passed last year at the federal level, that provides a lot of money for spending on infrastructure projects and on advanced manufacturing for microchip plants. Those are jobs for engineers potentially. So those are things that we get behind. And because those laws pass at the federal level ACEC National advocates for those, and we support them in doing that. So it's on the big national issues that impact engineers. That's where you see a lot of interface between ACEC National and the state organizations to help grease the wheels in Washington to make those good things pass that are going to help engineers.
Do you think we're at a good stage right now as our efforts as ACEC? You think the efforts of ACEC are producing what they're supposed to from a lobbying perspective and getting these laws into action?
I think they're aware of the messages and they're putting forth the effort to make sure the lawmakers hear the messages. But we're not at all the only people that have a stake in what happens in Washington. So there are other trade organizations that have their own side of things too. For instance, with the workforce issue, there's a shortage of engineers in the country. There have been for a few years.
Correct.
And one solution to that, a short-term solution to that would potentially be to increase the number of H-1B visas that are available for students to stay in this country and practice engineering after they graduate from college. I'm sure there's counter arguments to that because legislation hasn't really passed to help expand that very much yet. But it's something we advocate for from our side of it. We explain why we're advocating for it. It's up to lawmakers to take all sides of it and pass the laws that are going to work best for everybody.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like we're solving that problem anytime soon because I personally know someone who is trying to apply for an engineering school around the country, and it's really, really hard to get into any of the colleges to study engineering these days because there's limited capacity.
Yeah. I mean, we have engineers at Walter P. Moore that suffer this issue too. That looks trying to apply for green cards, and have been working with us for 5 years, and still have visa issues based on the bureaucratic process to get that through. So it's definitely still an issue.
It is. I want to talk a little bit more about, I want to talk about BIM models and
Sure.
integrative delivery. And I know that you have extensive experience there. So what are the advantages of integrative delivery, especially in collaborating with trade contractors?
With integrated delivery, well, I think this is definitely a different track. But something I am very passionate about also, and this gets more into the work I do at Walter P. Moore. BIM modeling in general, it's from a building design standpoint, it's been a great tool. It's taken us light years beyond the old version of CAD drawings, doing everything in 2D, having manual coordination, passing drawings back and forth. BIM has made it a lot easier for us to get into a live 3D virtual space and coordinate how a building is going to go together. But it still hasn't really there's still a disconnect between what designers use a BIM model for and what the construction side uses a BIM model for. And the construction side will have a very detailed BIM model put together for how the steel is going to get fabricated, because the fabrication software or the fabrication tools are all digital. So they like having a BIM model for that. The mechanical engineering or mechanical, electrical, and plumbing trades will have a highly detailed BIM model for how all the MEP systems are going to go together and how they're going to fit together. But that doesn't exactly talk to exactly what the design team is doing. We use BIM models for a little bit different thing. And I think there's a lot of room for taking the design team BIM models and turning those into fabrication models. And that's something we're playing with. And I know a few of our competitors are playing with that too. I'd say we're doing a lot more successfully than our competitors are. But it's taking our design side BIM model, making it very accurate, something that we're saying the entire design or construction team can count on, and turning that over as a deliverable to go build, cut steel and cut rebar, and actually take the things that are in our model and just hand it over to the shop to have them cut steel off of it. That's, I think, the next generation of where BIM modeling is going. It's just, I think it's the liability, the contractual issues, the fee part of it. It's really a different model than how the industry has operated for hundreds of years. So it's going to take some time to get through that, but I think there's a lot of potential there.
How high fidelity BIM models have streamlined project schedules? You've been managing projects for some time right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do they actually, high fidelity BIM models, streamline the project schedules and improve project reliability or delivery?
I think they can, yes, because